I believe that the current gold prices are the best ones to date. It's time to get enthusiastic. I intend to have my best season ever before I turn 65. Earn some actual cash. A federal order has wiped out Tony Beets' entire season. However, this had nothing to do with pollution or safety. He lost millions of dollars due to a clerical error that lasted nearly a year. Parker Schnabel jumped in, as Tony's dream degenerated into a nightmare of red tape. What are you discussing? What are you discussing? Last week, what did you sign? Contract, huh? Have you read anything? Yes. Supposedly installed hydraulic riffles? Simply arrive in the spring and shut us down. We just begun slewing, Tony. Really? We will demonstrate that Parker did not simply take advantage of Tony's failure. He hatched a grand scheme to control the Klondike. Parker's record-breaking gold haul and the terrible treachery that destroyed trust and brought down a once powerful gold empire are unexpected. The Klondike don't overlook errors when the government says no. The self-described Viking of the North, Tony Beets, learned this lesson quickly. Not because of frozen ground or malfunctioning machinery, but because of a single piece of paper. His ambitious plan for the Indian River, claim a location he thought held a fortune, came to a halt. Tony Beets was shut down by the government in the most ruthless manner possible. His water license was the issue. When you think about it, it's humorous. An error dragged down a man who controls million-dollar machinery and pushes mountains of dirt. He believed that a 15-acre area was covered by his license. In actuality, it was only beneficial for a single acre. Months of planning, perspiration, and hundreds of dollars of fuel were all for nothing after that 1-acre error. Unannounced inspectors arrived, glanced over the documentation, and cut the power. Silence, rust, and the acrid taste of lost gold. No disputes, no second chances. It couldn't have come at a worse time. Tony's crew had just brought his fabled wash plant back to life, after it had not roared to life for almost 5 years. They had been battling rusty components, stripped bolts, and split hoses for weeks. Go weld it, Kevin. Without removing that, weld it. Yes. You might as well disassemble it. No, you don't realize how fortunate we are. That doesn't need to be removed. Piece of cake then. They fought every step of the way as they put the flimsy puzzle of dented steel together. It was a monstrous facility that could handle hundreds of cubic yards of pay dirt each hour. It was a relic, though. It was already a victory to get it to run. The authorities shut it off as soon as it clattered to life. He pictured the crew's morale. They stared at the mud as they sat motionless, their enormous yellow machines sitting in silence. A nightmare of red tape replaced the hope of a season that broke records. With each day that went by, money was wasted. Tens of thousands of dollars are spent every day on fuel, equipment rentals, and the wages for a full crew. Tony was bleeding money since there was no gold emerging from the earth. At Indian River, his entire operation was halted. What took place? We were shut down. His bills were building up like cordwood. His team was losing faith, and he had no claim to labor or means of earning money. In a desperate attempt to salvage what remained of the season, he had no choice but to withdraw to his old haunts at Paradise Hill. However, Paradise Hill had remained dormant for more than a month. Time was running short, the machinery were rotting, and the roads were washed out. Meanwhile, an entirely different scenario was developing only a few miles away. The scene at Parker Schnabel's camp was one of brutal efficiency. Parker was printing gold, while Tony was mired in a bureaucratic quagmire. Big Red and Sloofer, his cutting-edge wash plants, were operating like clockwork. Parker is one of the largest claim holders in the Yukon, having staked $15 million to purchase 7,500 acres on Dominion Creek, consuming pay dirt around the clock. With every step planned out and every choice supported by data, his group operated with military accuracy. There was only orderly, deliberate work, no confusion or guessing games. Parker did more than mine. In real time, he was creating an empire of gold. He had put millions of dollars into new land, believing that the drill findings would yield lucrative reserves. Parker was witnessing the fantastic return on his investment. while Tony struggled with rusty bolts that were 5 years old. It was a harsh contrast. One child was struggling to stay alive. Rewriting the record books was the other. Tony wasn't merely stopped by the government shutdown. It made it possible for his fiercest opponent to seize control of the Klondike. However, neither Parker's triumph nor the shutdown were the actual gut punch. Tony's own family was about to be betrayed. Betrayal in cold blood. When a family like the Beet breaks up, it's not because of a disagreement. It's mountains of riches, vanity, and over-control. A move from within Tony's own camp made things 10 times worse just when his season was at its lowest point. In order to join the one crew, Tony could never bear to lose to Parker Schnabels. Kevin Beets, his eldest son and a parent, left his father's claim. When I think, if this is just like Tony's thing, then Tony can deal with his. I feel better about assisting you. However, well done on completing this. Oh, I'm grateful. Thank you. This wasn't merely a change of employment, though. This was a war declaration. Years of work, loyalty, and family history were all lost in the process of this daring action that completely upended the Beets dynasty. You must comprehend the Beets family dynamic in order to see why this was such a significant event. Tony never gave up, dug deeper, and yelled louder, carving his empire out of the freezing Yukon soil. This is where his children grew up. They don't need gentle hands or cartoons. They grew up surrounded by the weight of rocks, the boom of engines, and the stench of grease. Everyone assumed that Kevin, the firstborn, would succeed him and wear the Viking crown. But beneath all that gold dust, mining doesn't give a damn about expectations. It was tense. Kevin had a distinct wiring pattern, returning with conflicting emotions. I thought the trauma would be more advanced. Nearly 10 months have passed since the trauma was run, I believe. And Tony is incredibly annoying. He probably didn't realize how much of that faith and I took on. He enjoyed efficiency, mathematics, and using intelligence to improve things, not merely using force. He had returned from college with new ideas after studying leadership and computing. Conversely, Tony was traditional. His guidelines were straightforward. Less chatter, larger machinery, and more dirt. The conflicts began mildly. Disputes about the path of a haul truck or a drill setting. They developed into a continual source of conflict over time. Kevin identified opportunities to reduce waste, optimize, and mine data more intelligently. However, Tony had the last word, and it was typically crisp and loud. The pressure cooker erupted as the Indian River operation started to falter and the shutdown approached. As the claim bled money, Kevin saw his father revert to his old ways. He observed the crew of Parker Schnabel flying across the valley. New tools, improved timing, less yelling, more advancement, and fewer malfunctions. Kevin listened intently. Then he started to walk. He packed his bags one day. No huge announcement. No big dramatic fight. He simply vanished. After driving to Parker's camp, he got to work. The Klondike was rocked by just one maneuver alone. It was intimate. With the machines working and his voice calm, Tony attempted to ignore it, but everyone could see the reality. He slammed the excavator door, and you could see it. One silent departure marked the end of years of raising a son into a miner and of working side by side through muddy springs and frigid winters. Parker quickly benefited from the move. As if he had been there from the beginning, Kevin immediately hooked into Parker's system. Parker, hello. Hi there. For a rock truck, are you here? I'm hoping for a rock truck. Yes, the E is definitely available for purchase. That one has been the one I've been examining the most. Tires may require air and other supplies. He was more than just a skilled mechanic. He was a useful tool. Parker gave him some leeway. Allow him to make system adjustments. Kevin introduced tiny innovations and new habits that made a big difference. The crew accelerated their pace. There was less downtime. The cleanups grew in scope. Kevin transformed the game, not just the job. For Parker, it was a huge strategic win. In addition to gaining a talented foreman, he also stole a crucial piece from his opponent's chessboard and obtained crucial knowledge about Tony's business. Drama like this is not new to Gold Rush. Early on, there was a lot of disagreement on the Hoffman team. Jim Thurber and Greg Rimsberg became tense, and Thurber was eventually ejected. After years of being frustrated by inadequate leadership and lousy bargains, Dave Turin later left that same crew. However, it felt different when the Beets family collapsed. Father and son were at odds here. The wound from the betrayal was severe, and without the one person who knew them best, Tony's operations wheels were grinding as he made an effort to move forward. Parker was on the verge of winning the largest prize of his life, while Tony was struggling to pick up the pieces. The construction of empires. Have you ever thought that a fortune might be hidden in a dirty, godforsaken pit? Most likely not. Parker Schnabel, however, did. He put that idea into practice, and the outcome was a season that would be remembered as a highlight of the gold rush. Parker was stealthily making enough gold to garner media attention, while Tony Beets was fighting regulators and his own family. 7,427.25. Applause. A good season is not what we're discussing. We are discussing a legendary one. The total amount of gold was an astounding 7,300. That is more than 450 pounds of the yellow substance. That's considerably over $10 million at today's values. His first target was 5,000 ounces, which is crazy. It is nearly unheard of to surpass that goal by more than 2,000 ounces. This wasn't a lucky break or a fast payday. Years of preparation, unrelenting effort, and wise, measured risks led to this. For a young miner, he had taken a huge risk by investing millions of dollars to purchase his own land. However, his drilling program, which sampled the ground using contemporary methods, informed him that the gold was present. He won large because he bet big. Let's examine how he accomplished it. The equipment comes first. One of the most advanced enterprises in the Yukon is operated by Parker. His wash plants are specifically designed to be as efficient as possible. His fleet of excavators and rock trucks is up to date and well maintained. Parker was using technology, while Tony struggled to keep his antique dredge alive. He planned the most effective cut by using drones to examine the terrain and produce intricate 3D maps. This reduced waste and increased profit by enabling his team to transport dirt with surgical accuracy. Every fuel gallon and runtime hour was monitored and examined. It wasn't a treasure hunt, it was a business. The crew comes in second. Since a leader is only as good as his team, Parker has assembled a group of devoted, accomplished individuals. Parker had an impressive leadership staff, especially because Kevin Beets was now in charge of one of his sites. They kept the factories operating around the clock by working in shifts. They didn't lose days when a pump failed or a belt broke. In a matter of hours or even minutes, they got the issue resolved. Efficiency like that doesn't just happen. It is based on mutual trust and a common objective. The third is the circumstances. The market helped Parker a little. Every ounce of gold extracted from the ground was worth more, since the price of gold remained high throughout the season. However, the cost of fuel stayed low, which is important when your equipment uses hundreds of liters per day. Here's the trick though. Success is not always ensured by favorable circumstances. You must understand how to exploit them. The market was well positioned for Parker's lean, effective operation, which transformed favorable circumstances into a record-breaking haul. It is difficult to understand the scope of this activity. It would be like moving a small mountain to move enough dirt to yield 7,000 ounces of gold. I stated at the beginning that 80 ounces would be sufficient. That, in my opinion, is a really good outcome. I'm going to toast to that, dude. It's our territory, and I must admit that I'm thrilled about it. However, a new set of issues arises with that much gold. Security started to become a big worry. You can be sure that you will become a target once people learn about a haul that size. The location changed from a dig zone to a stronghold. Less loose ends, more guards, and more cameras. Each nugget needed to be tracked down and protected. Even though it's a high-class issue, it nonetheless exists. Parker was more than a gold prospector. He was establishing an empire, demonstrating that individuals who combine diligence with astute planning will dominate the mining industry in the future. But does this great success mean that the old methods are no longer relevant? And is there a chance that the true narrative is being overlooked? The old school opposes the new. Consequently, you are left with two whole distinct stories when you boil it all down. Tony Beets, a seasoned veteran and self-made legend, is on one side. He had a terrible season. He was left fighting for scraps with outdated equipment, deceived by his own son, and crushed by bureaucratic bureaucracy. Parker Schnabel, the young gun who won a $10 million prize after playing his cards flawlessly, is on the other side. It's tempting to see this as a straightforward tale of old school versus new school, of antiquated practices being supplanted by contemporary technology. But is it really that straightforward? Let's have a conversation as though we were in a Dawson City bar. Does this all occur in a day? Parker is shown hitting the mother lode in the show, and Tony's camp appears to be in ruins. It begs the question, are we overlooking anything important here? The problem is that having slick new toys wasn't the only factor in Parker's success. It had to do with a basic change of perspective. For many years, grit and gut sense were key components of gold mining. Tony is the perfect example of such way of thinking. He can sense whether there is gold on a piece of ground by looking at it. Parker, however, stands for a fresh approach. He has more faith in data than intuition. Before he ever relocated his wash plant, he made significant investments in testing and drilling. He was aware of the location, depth, and optimal method for obtaining the gold. On Indian River, Tony placed a wager. Parker's investment was well considered. When you think about it, it's amusing because luck always plays a part. Was Parker fortunate to purchase such fertile ground? Of course. He placed himself in the greatest possible position to take advantage of that luck. But no geologist on the planet can promise a season with 7,000 ounces. By doing the task, he reduced his risks. Tony, on the other hand, risked everything on a claim that had a recognized history of problems and an old wash plant that was a huge concern. The water license closure was merely the last nail in the coffin of a concept that was already beginning to falter. Was Tony simply unlucky? Or is Parker's high-tech strategy the only way to win? Comment below with your comments. For more, hit the like button and subscribe.